Good morning everyone, or maybe afternoon, or maybe evening, whatever time you are watching the video. We are right in the process of taking apart the roof on my house, because we are going to build a new one, as some of you may know. And I was thinking, hey, there's a couple of interesting things we can all learn, a couple of interesting lessons we can all learn from this house and from its carpentry. So without further ado, let's get into it. And the first lesson we can learn is to recycle. If you take a look at the rafter behind me, you might be thinking, hey, what's this joint for? There's like no use for it. And yeah, you'd be right. And the reason why this joint, this mortise, is here is because the rafter most likely was used on a different structure in a different roof, and when they have demolished the old structure, they just took the good beams, the healthy ones without much damage, and they just used them again, which is perfectly fine. There's a couple of more examples around the house, not just the rafters. There is some joinery here that serves no purpose whatsoever, and again, that's because of the fact that most likely these beams were used in a different structure. And the same thing applies here and here. These joints serve no purpose anymore, but they used to be part of something different in the past. So in case you are taking apart any structures of yours, you might think twice about cutting all the beams into firewood, and you might just use them again. The house itself is 150 years old, and as the beams were reused, they are actually even older. So apparently, recycling beams works just fine. Another important lesson is to keep the things in a good shape and repair any damage, and repair it as fast as you can, because if you let the damage spread, then you're gonna have even more problems to fix. A perfect example of repairs is these shingles right here. If you compare these shingles up here with the shingles down here, you can obviously see that these ones are in much better shape. And that's really unexpected, because these shingles, the shingles that are on the top, on the very top of the roof, they get damaged most often, because all the wind, all the rain is hitting them first, and these shingles need repairs often than the other parts of the roof. And the old carpenters knew it. You might see that these shingles, they are most likely the original ones when the roof was built during the 1860s to 1880s, but these ones, they are like new, and most likely in the past the old shingles, they got damaged, there was water leaking, so they just took away the old shingles and they replaced it with the new ones. So the lesson is, if there is damage, repair it as fast as you can. And this rule doesn't apply just for the shingles, it also applies for the beams themselves. This part of the beam is in a really bad shape. You can see it's wet, and you can see that there is some kind of a fungi in here. The good idea to do would be to cut this section of the beam and replace it with a new one. And of course, look for any damage in the roof and the source of the water leaking here. I unfortunately don't have any example of beam replacing on this house, so at least I try to show you some photos of other roofs where this technique was used. And the rule number 3 is to reuse. And you might say, hey, wait, I thought that the first rule was to recycle, and that's like the same thing, isn't it? And in my eyes, it's not. If you recycle things, you take the original thing and you use it for something else. For example, you take a beam that was used as a rafter and you use it for something entirely else on the roof, or maybe you just use it for entirely else project, like you make a bed out of it, like I did in the past. And reusing is taking the things as they are and using them again. And to give you an example, if you take a look at this shingle right here, again, not very good shape, not in very good shape, but these shingles can be reused as they are. You can just flip them, and as you can see, the shingle right here looks way better. And if you find enough of these shingles, you can just make another roof out of them. Obviously it won't be as good as the previous one, but putting it on something like a chicken coop, for example, will be perfectly fine. And this lesson was very important for the carpenters and generally homesteaders in the past, because material was, I meant to say expensive, but it wasn't really expensive in terms of money, but it was expensive in terms of work, because you have to transport it, you have to cut it, generally do everything by hand. And if you do things by hand, you think twice about throwing stuff away. So lesson number 3, reuse stuff where you can. And the lesson number 4, and the most important one I think, is to know how to improvise and how to use what you have. In the past it was very common that you won't be able to get some materials, you won't be able to get the perfect dimensions of the beams you needed, so you just had to improvise a little bit. People got really comfortable using things like SketchUp and AutoCAD, where everything is perfectly straight, everything is perfectly right angle. And in the process they kinda lost the ability to improvise and work with materials that are not perfect. Not perfect at all, in fact. And there is a bunch of examples on this roof of improvisation, and one of them might be this wall plate right here. It has a very different height on one end and on the other end. And the reason is that when they cut the tree for the wall plate, they did just the rough work, and they weren't really trying to shape the tree into a perfect shape. They just roughly shaped the edges, and they followed the natural tapering of the tree. And having a beam that's tapering from one end to the other would be a real nightmare to modern carpenters, but it was perfectly normal in the past. Another example of improvisation and using whatever you can are these batons behind me. The original builders, carpenters of this roof, took a thin trees and they hewed just two sides, just the top and just the bottom. And to save time and again save some money, they left the other two sides rough. There's even a bark on them, which is something we are not used to again. We are used to these perfectly shaped batons made on the saws, but these batons, they were made by hand. They try to save as much time and energy as they can, and it works fine, so no problem here. And now I have to get back to work to take this roof apart, so we can hopefully build a new one. See you guys there!